But no, there's definitely a lot of excitement in the space now, and we see it. And for me, it's exciting because, like I said, I like physical things. Not to bash on anyone, but I don't think anyone needs more software companies competing in the same space. I think no one needs another, consumer app that helps you breathe. Okay, like no one needs another CPG product. No one needs another, direct to consumer t-shirt brand. We're having a tough time in the world. I think a lot of people are. You and I are probably a bit more isolated because we're on the coasts, right? You look anywhere in the world, it's a tough place for a lot of people, and I think solving around the physical things matters. And I'm excited about people investing in and building really, really hard things. When I say really hard things, like, yeah, energy is a problem, right? Housing is a problem. There's a lot of interesting things to solve that don't have to be moonshots.
I'm Ty Morse. This is my conversation with Aleksandr Gampel, one of the co-founders of Cuby Technologies. I hope you enjoy. Okay, let's start with how did your family immigrate from Russia?
Yeah, that's funny. So I moved to the US when I was 8. I moved to the suburbs of PA, which is kind of random, but my dad's brother was living in PA at the time. So my parents, they were in the middle of divorce. They thought it would be better for me to go to school in the US because it's a better education system. So I moved to the suburbs of Philly.
What did they do beforehand?
My family?
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a developer in Russia. So I grew up around real estate my whole life. So it's pretty opportune, I guess, that I'm building what I'm building.
Yeah. Did you have any, as a, son of a Russian immigrant, first generation kid, did you have any weird expectations from your parents?
No, my parents were pretty hands off in that sense. It's funny, kids, they grow up wanting to be firefighters and astronauts, et cetera. I always just said, literally there's videos of me 3-4 years old, I want to build a business. I don't even know what that means. Just wanted to build something, build a business. I think my dad was my role model in that regard. And there's no expectation to do something different than what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Did you do anything unusual or interesting when you were younger?
So this is funny given the setup of what we're about to talk about, but I was a diehard Lego kid. I have a lot of theories about kids growing up with Legos, and we're about to have a kid, and even though we're having a girl, I'm gonna force feed her Legos for sure. But Legos is my big thing.
Yeah. What did you build?
Did you play with Legos?
Yes.
Yeah. I was the one that never followed the instruction manual. I was I'm going to figure this out, then I'm going to rebuild it into something else. And then eventually, you have so many Legos that you can just freestyle it. Yeah. So it's funny, actually, we get compared a lot to Legos because inherently of what we're building. And ironically, a Lego factory is a really good example of what we're trying to do because of the repeatable nature of the parts, et cetera. But I love Legos.
It's just a bunch of precision. And
what's crazy about Legos though? Have you been to the Lego store recently at all?
No.
Okay, so I wanted to, with my wife, we're let's go get a Lego thing. And I think during COVID, we're let's just go put something together. They've gotten really expensive.
Yeah, it's $160 or $200.
It's crazy. Legos are expensive now, which is, I when I was playing with Legos when I was, sub 8 years old, this was in Russia, they were less expensive from what I remember.
Did you immigrate after you had already, how old were you when you immigrated?
8. So when I was 8, we moved to the suburbs of PA, and I went to, the whole public school system from basically second grade through high school, and then stayed in Philly for university. Yeah.
Did you create anything or sell anything or start any businesses when you were super young?
Honestly, no. That's the interesting part. No, never. I was always toying with business ideas and stuff, but never actually found something, then resold it, and none of that. I played sports and, did my homework.
What would your friends have described you as?
So funny. My best friend, he's also in real estate, and at my wedding, I think he had a really, astute description of who I am as a person. And I think I'm very passionate. That's how people describe me. And I think that carries over to, the business world a lot and what we're doing here. I was always the guy, even in 6th grade, preaching the latest tech and, adopting the latest tech and always talking about new businesses that are launching, et cetera. So it was always interesting to me. That was the thing I wanted to talk about, not which basketball team won, but really that topic was hey, what's on TechCrunch? That was cool to me.
Yeah, I would be kind of curious, why did you decide? So I think you went to was it Drexel, and that's also in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do engineering and finance of all things?
Well, first of all, I went to Drexel because I got a full ride.
Okay.
So that's always a plus, right? College is expensive, etc. I'm sure my parents would have been nice and helped me to go anywhere, but I felt bad. And, free education is a free education. And Drexel was a pretty good engineering school. I knew I wanted to study some combination of business and engineering. To me, engineering is a way of thinking. It's, everyone thinks it's this technical field, which it is, but it's also a way to dissolve problems into something actionable. So I studied engineering and business at the same time. Went there and studied that because I thought it was, honestly, at the time, I thought it was just the thing to do. It was cool and like the right approach. No other reason than that, really.
Interesting. Did you do anything in college, like start any businesses or?
Yeah, always was trying. Yeah, my friend and I, we tried to start essentially, if you remember the company called Handy, they went out of business because they might have been bought and now maybe relaunched, but basically their whole thing was like, hey, $19 cleaning of an apartment. It's like, that's not that sustainable because they realized there's no second time bookings. People just wanted the $19 cleaning. So we tried to do something like that, like little iterations of things like that. But Drexel was an interesting school because you're there for 5 years. It's a 5-year program. In the middle 3 years, you're working full time for 6 months. So I got to work in private equity on Wall Street, et cetera. In real estate. So I was working full time for 6 months out of the year.
Yeah. What attracted you to private equity? I saw that you initially went from like finance and you eventually went into, founding a startup.
Yeah. I think it's a good foundation for everyone, to learn how to run a business, how to invest in a business. And, the finance aspect of my career has been focused on real estate predominantly, investing in developers, working with developers. So really the physical built world and the finance behind that. You'll see through my kind of track record, it was always kind of tech or real estate. Now it's starting to fuse, but I've always liked physical things in terms of, buildings, the spaces that we live, work, and play in. We're recording a podcast in a building. You're later going to have lunch in a building, right? Like it is the backdrop of a person's life. So I've always liked real estate and, sometimes we don't have a reason for doing things. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I think will end up and tangentially still try to touch real estate in some regard on the investing side. But yeah, I did that after school.
Yeah. Did you end up like thinking about any other businesses? Cause I imagine that you went through a lot of different ideas before you settled on this. Did you have any during that like almost, I think 10-year period?
I think to say like you had an idea for a business almost like forces an idea. I don't believe in that. I don't think I'm sure out of all the people you're going to interview, you're not to talk about the fact that you're going to interview thousands of people eventually. I'd say probably 1% were sitting there and were like, oh, I'm going to think through ideas to start something. Generally, it doesn't happen that way. I feel like if you force an idea, building a business is very hard. You're not going to be around when the hard parts come around to actually build it. So What I've
noticed is that like a lot of great founders will, as they go through their day or go about life, they just naturally
try to solve problems.
And then they're like, oh, this is a problem.
I have that all the time, but like I'm already one of those people that has ADD. Like, so I try to, for me, the hardest thing is focus. So like I try to these days focus really hard, but like to say from like this point on through the last decade, have I had like ideas I've written down and tried to execute? Yeah. There's a lot.
Do you have a few?
Sure, I'll talk about a few. Like a lot of them for me are tied to physical real estate. Like what can be venture backed but can sit on top of the real world. I like stuff in that regard. I mean, give you one recently. I was on the plane flying back, and because we're having a daughter, I'm like thinking about certain things I wouldn't usually be thinking about. And I'm like, oh, camps, summer camps. Why has no one built an operating business that's kind of like a scalable camp, like an overnight camp that's branded well, kind of like a Hoxton Hotel or a Soho House, but for kids, like well programmed the way that like Elon built a school, right? Because he didn't like what was out there for, the education system for his own kids. Why hasn't anyone done that in overnight camps? Like if I was free, I'd be building that right now. So for anyone that needs an idea, I feel like that's a very scalable business that has a physical component to it that would do incredibly well. Of course, maybe not venture dollars. That's not what would be back.
Maybe not venture dollars, but that's okay. Not all businesses have to be venture scale.
Oleg and I, by the way, whenever we're building this, because of inherently what we're solving and because of the full stack nature of it and the vertical integration, every time we solve some internal problem, it's like a Medusa's head. You have 5 more problems to basically, solve. And that in its own right spins out ideas or solutions essentially that could be their own business. Like there's so many businesses within Cuby that we feel like could be a standalone product, which, I'm sure we'll get into, but but I don't know if I was like trying to build a million things at once necessarily. It was all kind of serendipitous and rolled one thing and all these experience rolled into something that was helpful or later applicable, etc.
Is there any others that you kind of thought about?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have a whole list that I can pull out, and I'm sure a lot of them are kind of embarrassing in that regard. There was a lot around, so real estate inherently is not like the stock market. It's not very efficient. So there's no like quantitative trading equivalent in real estate. So a topic I'm really excited about is really how do you apply data to make decisions to essentially filter thousands of real estate deals and get to the best one quickly without having 1,000 analysts behind you. I feel like a lot of folks have tried to approach this, and there's a really, really good solution to folks trying to do this. I think that would be an interesting problem to solve and tackle.
Yeah. How did you end up, like, why did you decide to do, I think it was probably 8 years or something. Did you do like 6 years and then WeWork and then a few more years?
You mean like the trajectory?
Yeah.
So
how'd you like plan it out?
Yeah, I got to work at really interesting places during college. I mean, I worked at a REIT, which is a real estate investment trust. It's like a publicly traded real estate investment vehicle.
It's a pool of real estate. Yeah.
Exactly. That was interesting. Then during my college career, I also got to work at literally on Wall Street at PNC on their large cap quantitative stock trading team, essentially, their investment management team. That was interesting. And then I worked at SIG, which is a derivatives options trader in New York doing sell side equity research. I hated Wall Street. Like
what did you not like about it?
The intangible nature of it. Like you're buying companies, you're never really like seeing them. Like, yeah, you're talking to management teams on calls, etc. But like just the intangible nature of like owning this theoretical thing out there, you own a piece of it. I'm more hands-on. Like I want to see the thing. I want to touch the thing. I want to be involved. But I did think Wall Street is important for everyone because you have this foundational base of like, everyone doesn't think Excel is important anymore. Excel is pretty damn important. Like you need to understand how to model your own business, how to like project things. Like Excel is if I could tell anyone to pick up a skill, like learn how to model in Excel. I used to take pride in my models. Like I can take someone's financial model and understand how they think just by looking at how they've modeled something out. So Wall Street is important for that. But aside from that, I just didn't like the structured intangible nature of it. But then after that, I went into private equity, which is a little different, right? A little bit more hands-on.
Did you have any specific like deals that you enjoyed working on?
On the real estate side?
Or in the like private equity side?
It was all real estate though on the private equity side. I've never bought companies or invested in companies. This is all real estate. I mean, there were some deals where you're investing in operators or operating companies in the real estate space, like backing sponsors or developers and their platforms. There's a lot. I worked on maybe $2 to $3 billion worth of real estate transactions across different asset classes. I always liked the hospitality asset class. It's just more relevant. It's more fun. I always liked multifamily a lot. But look, I got to work on some stuff that was a little different, like co-working and co-living. And we happen to be in a WeWork right now.
Yeah. So how did you end up working at WeWork?
Yeah, it was after school. It was actually like my first official job outside of all the co-ops I did in school. I'm trying to remember how I got in WeWork. I mean, I was always enamored by the idea of technology and real estate fusing, just given my family's background, what I like. Studied engineering because I like technology, and this was an opportunity to do both at the same time. And this was at a time when WeWork was the hottest company in the world, period. And I got to join at an inflection point where there was about 1,000 people at WeWork, which seems like a lot relative to any other company, but I left, there was 13,000 people. That became a very big organization, and I joined the real estate team, and I think I reached out cold. I wrote a really interesting letter. I got to find this letter because that would be a really fun piece of memorabilia to look back on. And I joined the real estate team, which was always inherently the smallest team within WeWork.
Why? Why was it the smallest?
I don't know. I mean, I guess just because as you're scaling up building physical space, you need more construction workers, you need more design people, whereas like you can scale up the real estate side of like searching for real estate, signing leases, et cetera. It's a smaller team. But everything I worked on in the real estate team, I think was not the treadmill of like WeWork, like the traditional stuff. I worked on building out a residential unit. I helped a little bit with their fund. WeWork at some point launched a real estate fund. The guy that ran it is an incredible human being that now runs kind of a company solving the solution of what I just talked about before, which is like, how do you apply, certain data to run real estate better? But WeWork was a very interesting experience. People love to shit on WeWork, but what WeWork was doing at the time, and we can get into like wrong cost of capital and whatnot, because kind of me realizing wrong cost of capital is why I did what I did next, and we can talk about that too. But WeWork was an amazing business from the perspective of like what WeWork was able to do in short timelines, which is find me any other company in the world that can build out 15 locations like this per month, 60,000 square feet per location per month. That takes a lot of coordination, a lot of internal software. I think it was the platform to set up all other prop tech or construction tech, if you will. So it was fun for me. I enjoyed it. I think a lot of the people were very smart. There's a lot of companies that have raised a lot of money with founders who've spun out of WeWork. So
was it like a good incubator for future founders?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. At some point it got very bloated and like, again, wrong cost of capital. I'm a big believer of raising money from the right people at the right time. Venture is basically for R&D. That's what venture is, with expectation of, unlimited upside and limited downside. At some point you get to a point where debt, project financing, private equity is better forms and better cost of capital.
Interesting. So, what things did you like learn while working at WeWork that you wouldn't have learned anywhere else?
I don't think it was specific learnings. I think it was just being around the people that wanted to be around WeWork. So I would attribute a lot of my network, which, like you, I pride quite a lot. Because really at the end of the day, when you're building stuff, it's how do you get from A to Z in the quickest possible manner? That only happens through the people in between. So I attribute a lot of my WeWork path through the folks I've met, because at the time, again, WeWork was the hottest company in the world, not just prop tech. I don't even think that was a word back then. Like, it was the hottest company in the world.
What valuation did you come in at?
I left when I was still 47. Yeah. Or close to maybe 23 at that point. I don't remember.
Okay. So that was like 2017-ish.
I left 2019-ish, late 2018.
Oh, was it? Oh, did was Uber like the 2017 saga, and then I guess WeWork was later?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even remember, because with COVID, it's so hard to know dates. So I came in 2016 and stayed through 2019.
Yeah.
Through the start of 2019. So it was already kind of on this trajectory of, the trajectory, if you will. But yeah, so what I was saying is, it's not what I learned at WeWork, it's the people I met, because it wasn't just the people in WeWork, it was everyone wanted to talk to people at WeWork at the time. So I met a ton of funds that were backing things in the built environment, a ton of founders building around the built environment. It's just access to a lot of interesting people and being in the right room at the time.
Yeah. How have you thought about like serendipity maxing over the last, 10 years?
I think this is where you and I bonded, and I'm glad we bumped it at Reindustrialize, which, by the way, amazing conference. Shout out to all the folks that put it together. I think you and I bond over the fact that it's really, your network is the people in your phone book, not your wallet, I guess, especially while young. So I've always kind of optimized my career by the people I would surround myself with versus like optimizing for, salary or whatever, right? Like, what's 100K gonna change in your life, really, in the long grand scheme of things. So I always optimized about really the right people that can introduce me to more of the right people, et cetera. So I really prided myself with, the people I know. And I think folks that would describe me personally, they would say that probably, my personality is a connector. It's the people in my network. And I think you value those same things.
I certainly do. And that was one of my questions, is like, was the, becoming like actively trying to help people get to know other folks. Is that something that you learned, or is that something just innate?
I think it's innate. I think honestly, like, being that, like, out of the two of us, my partner is an incredibly technical human being with 20 years of building deep tech stuff. Okay. Out of the two of us, he's the technical one. So I don't need to focus on being incredibly technical. I need to focus on optimizing around the people we know who can help us move from A to B. I think that's innate though. It's hard to, I think, teach. Like, people are like, oh, how do you network better? I don't think that's a taught skill.
I think the way that you network is you just have the right mission, and then you get to the right folks.
So you said serendipity optimization. My life philosophy is add value to other people with nothing in return, period. It always spins back around. Like just add value to people, whether you make them money, whether you connect them to the right people, whether you do them a favor, just constantly add value, out into the world through other people, always returns.
Do you have any fascinating like story or circumstance where you did that to someone and then it just like magically?
I don't want to put people on the spot, but like I think I've made a lot of people money. I think, certain mentors appreciate that. There's people, I can talk about, you met one of the founders we're helping with, who ironically was one of our competitors at one point, and now he's starting a new business. The amount of introductions we've sent his way that will all convert into possible funding for his next business. We're not asking for anything in return. It's just a good guy that one day we'll work on something else together, etc. Just do that for people, I think, and it always spins back around.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know, you've mentioned like, I believe it was like either having dinner or something with Oleg. Was that how you guys met? How did you first meet him? And like, what's the story behind that? And like a little more detail.
It's a funny one because we skipped a couple chapters of my story, right? In terms of my career. And I've had like one of those non-linear careers. And I think a lot of founders, it's all non-linear for the most part, because I think founders are bad at having a job, if that makes sense. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. You're just naturally curious and, you do things exceptionally well and then you're ready to move on. That's been kind of my track record. And I feel like I'm relatively young, I'm turning 30. It's young. Oleg is older than me by 11 years. And a lot of my mentors and friends are like much, much older because I think I'm pretty mature for my age. But my career has been so unlinear, and I feel like I've done so many things that have just been not even relevant, but the combination of doing irrelevant things saves you at one point or another just based on the little things you pick up. So, everything from like private equity to like building a startup is so different, and all those things are important. Like, I don't think I'd be able to execute as well as I can now without having these random experiences. But the point is, we skipped a couple chapters, and
do you want to go?
No, we'll get back to it. But like at one point I was building a real estate development company with two of my mentors. One is a very big deal. The other one's also a big deal, and both really incredible human beings with different backgrounds. But as I was building this real estate development business with two of these mentors, we were building a lot of affordable housing, lowercase affordable. And there was a lot of demand for that product. And I realized that like hiring construction workers is hard. They're all a lot older and there's not a lot of them, especially when all of them are competing for different job sites, et cetera. Meaning job sites are competing for the workers. So at that point, I was messaging a lot of friends in the venture ecosystem, asking what they're backing. And I was very aware of existing solutions, whether it's modular, prefab, 3D printing. So anyone that's really tried to, in quotes, industrialize construction. And when I was interviewing a lot of these companies to be a potential customer as a developer, like I want to use something, like I'm willing to be progressive, willing to take the risk. There was a lot of reasons that I couldn't be a customer. It's that simple. In that time period, this was about 4 years ago, a friend introduced me to his family friend, which was Oleg. And he said, hey, I know you're searching for cool stuff in this space. This guy is starting to build something interesting here. You should talk to him. We were introduced on Zoom actually initially. I had one conversation with Oleg. He shows me, he's like, look, I think this is the way to industrialize construction. Like, this is why I think everything else hasn't worked. And actually there was two big competitors that one is in trouble, one no longer exists, that hit him up to do R&D with him essentially. So Oleg saw what people were building, and I'll tell you why he was building this in the first place. But I was introduced to him and I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense based on what I've seen. That doesn't make sense. And I think I texted him 3 days later and I was like, hey, I want to build this with you. I'm going to quit everything I'm doing and I'll build this with you. And we became very close friends. I probably talked to Oleg more than I talked to my wife. Honestly, it's sad.
Or wonderful.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. More like a
Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett situation.
We have a great relationship, and a lot of, I think VCs see that. We get a lot of feedback that like we're an awesome duo, and I appreciate and pride ourselves in that, because I think the number one reason companies fail is actually dynamics of founders. I think that's like statistically the number one reason. So I pride that we have a very good relationship, different skill sets, different experiences. So I met him in that regard. Why Oleg was building what we're building is he had two very successful businesses before this. Like, Oleg is not only an incredibly technical founder, which is rare, and you saw it reindustrialized. Deep tech is a hot category. And every venture investor wants to back an Oleg at this point. Super technical, but also has built stuff, has sold stuff, has done well for himself. Oleg is also a very shrewd business person, which I think is important. Like if I wasn't in the room and Oleg was negotiating, I'd trust him 100%. Like he is a very good negotiator, a good business person, but he did build 2 complicated businesses before this. One of the businesses was the equivalent of like maybe a new lab, or I don't know what other references, like Frog Design, like an industrial design company that essentially corporates and different startups would hire to build R&D on their behalf. Because he would have 200 engineers full-time working for him. They would come to him and say like, look, we're stuck here. We need to build this hardware. Like give us a certain, allocation of engineering hours, help us build this, but we keep the IP. He goes, great, let's do it. So at the time, Oleg was expanding his own headquarters. And he hired a developer and a general contractor and said, hey, like, let's go build a headquarters. This is what I want. I obviously can't build my own building, so like, want to work with you two. And as that process dragged on, he goes, oh my God, like what I know in lean manufacturing, which is his specialty, so Toyota's production system, the way Toyota builds cars, versus him hands-on dealing with the developer and general contractor, those are 2 polar opposite worlds, which you and I can get into the problem of why we're solving, but he inherently saw that his application of his skill set, it could have been anywhere. It could have been in defense, it could have been, in robotics.
Just so happened to be this is the product that has massive market.
He's like, my skill set for the rest of my life is most applicable to here. And that is the biggest problem I could tackle right now as it relates to now housing is what we're really tackling. So that's how he got into this. He was about 50,000 engineering hours into building around the solution when I met him.
Yeah.
But we met in that context.
So the other question I had was, I hear why you joined, and wanted to work with him. Why did he think that you were the right guy to work with as a partner?
That's honestly a good question for him. I've never asked that, right? Because it could have been so many different people. I think, actually, I can't answer that. For anyone, and I think your viewership is a lot of deep tech folks, probably in venture, who've read Oleg's book because we forced them. But Oleg wrote this book. It's called The Human Vector. It's not like a popular book per se, but it compares in physics vectors to building relationships, whether it's hiring a deep tech person to join your team, whether it's a life partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's an investor or customer. Everyone should be on the same kind of trajectory, so you don't collide at some point. After reading Oleg's book now and knowing it by heart, I now understand why Oleg picked me, or why we picked each other in a sense. The same life philosophies. We're morally incredibly aligned. Same work ethic. I do think I know why Oleg maybe picked me. Oleg is an engineer. He doesn't sell. He's not a seller. He doesn't sell anything. He says things how they are, and it hurts, and sometimes it helps. It depends who you're talking to. I'm passionate, and I don't hide that fact. So I'm incredibly passionate when I speak, when I do things, when I'm, convincing investors to invest, when I'm convincing customers, and I'm convincing us. Like, I'm incredibly passionate, and I think that is where we balance each other out. And like, I understand the problem. I come from a world where I am the customer. So I understand how a building gets built. I understand who finances a building. I intimately understand the problem, or at least I think. So I think that's important, and I think we picked each other really in that regard.
How do you think, I think that you guys have one of the best co-founder dynamics that I've come across. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on how people can find and have a successful, find a great co-founder and have a successful co-founder relationship, if that's the direction they choose to go?
It's funny. I think one of the skills I lack is or maybe not lack because I'm learning through having to learn, but if I could have a choice, I would be a one-man team. I don't like running people. I don't like managing people. Oleg is the best operator when it comes to managing people and running people. That's why we quickly scaled to now almost 150 people. And he has a whole process for this. He's incredible at managing people, and it's something I'm trying to learn a lot. So I wouldn't be good advice as to how do you, in quotes, hire a co-founder, right? Because you're asking specifically, someone's building something, they need someone to balance themselves out. They're likely hiring a co-founder. I'm not the best person to ask, but what I think is serendipity plays a big part. It really does. And I think a lot of times co-founders are just two people that come together to solve a problem and share a passion. Hopefully the dynamic is a very different skill set, because it doesn't make sense to have, two cooks in a kitchen that both are making steaks, right? It doesn't really make sense. I I think it's important to share life philosophies. I think it goes beyond that, because when things get really, really tough, that's naturally where there's friction, and people tend to, companies tend to break up. People tend to throw each other under the bus. Like it needs to be life philosophy that aligns, and like character and morality. Those things need to align well together. I also think Oleg and I both are Eastern European. Those are very different life philosophies. I believe in the US, relationships are very transactional, where in other places in the world, relationships are built on something deeper, I think. I think we're getting back to that, but I think a lot of the relationships in the US tend to be transactional. And
I think it's less transactional on the West Coast. At least that's been my experience has been that people are much more willing to pay it forward.
Look, I mean, this is more like a debate question, like the US and where we're headed and culture. But I actually think Catherine Boyle reposted this once, and I thought it was an awesome chart. It was like the 5 things that make up the 5 things that make up a society. And I think it was like a graphic on like, there's like culture, there's like patriotism, there's like education, there's capitalism. There's a couple of these things, and religion, I think one of them. In the US, we're like a decline in all these metrics except capitalism, which is fine. Like I'm the biggest proponent of capitalism because I've been and lived in places and know many people in countries that don't have capitalism. Capitalism works incredibly well. Huge fan, like all in. If I could have like, whatever, that's not relevant. But yeah, all these other things, we probably are a bit on a decline. And I think relationships to tie into some of these cultural morality issues. And I think finding someone to work with that shares something deeper beyond just a transactional relationship, I think is important.
Yeah. The one
Actually, wait, I'll tell you something funny.
Go for it.
I don't know if you watch The Office.
I have watched quite a bit of The Office.
I can recite everything from The Office, but there's a Michael Scott, like one of these like, interviews with like Michael Scott, whatever, in the show. And he's like, business is all personal. You know how like people say business is not personal? It is if you're a founder. It's your life. It's 120 hours a week. Like everything you do is like a jab at you, because it's a company and its culture is a reflection of you, and what you're building is like what you're thinking about all day and night, and that then becomes something that gets put into the world. So like in that regard, business is all personal. Who you pick as a co-founder is all personal in a sense, and that relationship is personal. And like if you build a business correctly, that's a relationship that is probably a 20-year relationship, especially in something like deep tech, because those things inherently have much longer timelines.
Yeah, and unless there's like a blow up, there's, it's just going to be a useful relationship forever, pretty much.
Yeah, 100%. Like if everything goes well, I mean, Oleg and I have these ambitions that like if things go well, I mean, we'll likely share a family office. We're always going to be building other things that are going to be attached to this business. And like, I don't see a world where if things go the way we're planning for them to go, that we're not in each other's lives. That's how I look at it.
I would be curious to know. So right now we're seeing a lot more investors be willing to go into hard businesses. You guys have been doing this for the past like 4 years now, I believe.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little bit longer.
So unofficially, it's been 5 years of like toying around, and R&D through Oleg's actually past business. But officially about 3.5.
Okay. 3.5. I imagine that you have kind of experienced the full transition from it not being cool and people not really wanting to give money towards now people are willing to give money on quite high valuations. What has that transition been like? What was it like when it started, or when you guys started?
There's like a macro answer to this and a micro answer to this, because our category is still pretty hard, and there's been a graveyard of folks that have tried to, in quotes again, industrialize construction, because I don't really think that's what we're doing, but that's where we get placed. Like people tell us no all the time. Like I think that's literally the job of a founder, is just
get told no and keep on going.
Yeah, exactly. And just keep trying. So I would say we get told 99% of the time versus that 1%. That's all it takes, which is fine. And we filter investors the same way. If someone doesn't understand what we're doing, they're probably not the right investor, because again, those vectors they're collide at some point.
Yeah,
exactly. Things get easier as you start to show proof points. Like all a business is like you start at the riskiest point in time with the riskiest cost of capital, which is the most expensive, and you deliver milestones that unlock, or I guess, they unlock and de-risk over time. And that's all the trajectory of a company is just de-risking. That's all you're constantly doing. Even when we started, I think there was kind of excitement about hardware, but not to the extent where like people on a 2-month notice are willing to go out to Detroit and like, support this. And like, probably since we started, I mean, general partners at VC firms that we've known say 3.5 years ago versus who we know now, I mean, that's like 4 or 5x to people, not because we didn't know them, but because they weren't in this category before. Yeah, they just weren't in this category. And we noticed kind of something interesting, and Oleg and I, because we get told no so much, we have this joke that we're going to write this parody book about venture called Too Early and Too Late. That's like the story of our life. It's either we're too early or we're too late. Like, okay, like it is what it is. But no, there's definitely a lot of excitement in the space now, and we see it. And for me, it's exciting because, like I said, I like physical things. Not to bash on anyone, but I don't think anyone needs more software companies competing in the same space. I think no one needs another, consumer app that helps you breathe. Okay, like no one needs another CPG product. No one needs another, direct to consumer t-shirt brand. We're having a tough time in the world. I think a lot of people are. You and I are probably a bit more isolated because we're on the coasts, right? You look anywhere in the world, it's a tough place for a lot of people, and I think solving around the physical things matters. And I'm excited about people investing in and building really, really hard things. When I say really hard things, like, yeah, energy is a problem, right? Housing is a problem. There's a lot of interesting things to solve that don't have to be moonshots. So Oleg and I, we almost hate being placed into deep tech. There's inherently, that's where our capital lives, because we don't think what we're doing is binary. And it's not that risk profile. To me, like deep tech, truly binary. And where did the word deep tech come from? It's a lot of biosciences, right? Like that's true deep tech, because there's really a binary outcome. Like you either succeed and really, really like you kill it, or you're a zero, a lot of
But
space.
There's lots of like gray area where you could be worth, a few billion and
forget
a
the
lot
worth.
of
Like
billions.
we just even think that like what we're doing is inherently not a science project. We're done all our technical risk. Everything going forward is operational execution risk. So we're not the science project, at least we're confident we're not. The science project where it's, I'll give an example, not to bash anyone, because I think it's important for anyone to try to build these moonshots, and it's all tied to kind of, again, cost of capital and how patient is the capital. But let's say potentially mining asteroids, incredibly interesting given we're running out of certain resources. But those things are binary in terms of scientific kind of, can you do it? Can you not do it?
You don't know for like 15 years.
Yeah, we're taking things that exist in the market, combining a lot of those things, and that is hard to do, but it's not a binary outcome. But to go back to your question, yes, this category seems to be very excited. I don't know if yet there's still even enough capital to deploy in everyone building in this space, but that's good. And I think interest rates going up and cost of capital going up is a good thing, just because the last couple of years, building a business was not hard when there's free money. Building a good business is hard when you have to be very resourceful. You have to be scrappy. You have to spend your dollars correctly. You have to generate revenue. So it filters out.
I would almost argue that it might even be easier to build a good business in a high cost of capital environment, simply because
look at post-financial crisis. Those were all the unicorns that are actually on public markets today doing super well. They were built during the hardest time.
Built during the frugality period.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask, so there's been quite a few, you guys have the Elon model of the factory, the factory is the product, and I really love that, I think, mostly. But can you tell me about like the other people that have tried to mass manufacture housing and it just like didn't work? Like what's the failure cases?
Again, we have a thesis. We believe it's right. Other people have a different thesis. So again, not to bash anyone, I think it's important that everyone keeps trying to tackle solving ways we build, just because the problem is so important. And the reason why venture keeps backing this problem, despite it being a very hard category, because no one's yet succeeded. Like maybe we won't succeed. Maybe it's not even the next cohort that doesn't succeed. Maybe it's the one after that that succeeds. The reason why venture is so excited is because venture's model is the following. Pick the largest TAM you could find, pick the least amount of efficiency where there's inherent problems. You multiply those two things, you get massive, massive outcomes. And that's what a fund structure is supposed to seek and find and invest in. So this category it's important because housing is probably the most important problem no one's talking enough about. And you see all the time headlines around like, hey, it's unaffordable to buy a home, to rent a home, etc. People get it. Why? Why is that the case? Why are we not building? Why is it so hard to build? Some people argue that the issue is bureaucratic. So regulation, being able to expedite the way developers actually buy and title and permit land to be able to build. Our thesis is more simple than that. We don't think there's enough physical hands to go build the housing that we need to build. And the right way to solve affordability is like dump more housing into the supply to meet the demand. And right
or like
now
high quality housing. Yeah.
Not even high quality. I wish like if it was easier, like it doesn't have to be high quality. Just build more housing. Forget the quality. Right now there's a massive imbalance in demand of like people that need homes / want homes, can afford homes versus how much we're building. So supply demand, simple economics, housing is super expensive because there's more people that want it than there is of it. So we think the way to build more is to figure out how to build with less skilled labor. Because if you back out for a second, like the real problem is there's not enough skilled people to go be building, because you're young, I'm young, everyone around us is young. How many people do you know that are actual construction workers swinging a hammer?
Yeah.
I don't know many. Like actually, I don't know any. And I was in real estate. Like I know one person, and because of this business, because they're our partner, that actually show up to a construction site and swing a hammer. Everyone I ask, and I love asking new friends, like, you have a cousin, you have a friend that's a construction worker? The answer is no in our age demographic. And if you actually look statistically, just pick the US, because I can then talk about how this problem is the same everywhere else. Mostly first world countries is where this is an issue. If you look at the US, we're missing millions of construction workers, like ones that we need to hire today to go just build the housing that we need to go build, not the one that would help balance the imbalance. And if you look at an average construction site, like you and I could go drive out to the suburbs right now from New York City and go to a construction site. Average age, statistically, of that construction worker is, I think, 42 years old. That's old for a very physical heavy industry. Like you're lifting things, you're in the sun all day. I mean, it's a dangerous job. And what happens in 10 years? Like you're reaching a certain statistical arena where a lot of those folks will retire out of the industry. And I think the actual fact is about 40% of the US construction workforce is going to retire in the next 10 years. What happens then? Now we're building even less housing despite household formations increasing by 10%. So we believe, in our thesis is, okay, industrialized construction is important because you need to figure out how to build more with less skilled labor. To do that, you have to be more efficient in building. And honestly, ironically, every other industry you pick, whoever makes your t-shirt, whoever makes your camera, whoever, builds software, everything has become more efficient. Construction is one of those industries where it's actually 1% productivity gain versus like the 7 to 8x productivity gain that has happened over the last 50 years. It's gone backwards. Construction worker today is less productive than one in the 70s. It's wild to think about.
Do you know why that is?
Bunch of reasons. Like part of it is like there's not enough skilled labor. Part of it is regulation has gotten harder. So like you can argue the way we build is actually, you have to build better basically now. Although I would argue what we were building back then was better. So industrialized construction is very important. What do we mean by industrialized construction? We have to build the same way that like every other product is built, and it's built in some sort of factory setting or some sort of lean manufacturing process. And right now there's really 3 categories of venture backing companies, and those 3 categories are volumetric modular. That's how we think about it. There's prefab, right? And there's 3D printing. Again, not to bash anyone, the one we're least optimistic about is 3D printing. That's one that we're very kind of complete opposite thesis, don't believe in 3D printing as a possible solution to build millions of homes in this way. I guess.
Do you want to explain why that is?
I guess simply put, from like a practical perspective, do you think if something were the solution, there would be like, I don't know, 4 dozen companies doing the same thing? From like a proprietary perspective.
I haven't heard of a single one that's like taken off and is building lots of homes, is what I would say.
My point is simpler. If this was this inherent proprietary solution that really, really worked a lot, there would be some sort of IP moat in a sense. But what I'm saying is I've seen 4 dozen 3D printing companies out there, all kind of plus minus the same thing. So already that, to me, if I was an investor or someone making a big bet, would disqualify that this is the possible solution. The second thing, 3D printing essentially is exactly what, is perceived by your audience. Like you have this giant 3D printer, and there's different forms of them that essentially make the walls of a home. So the framing subsection of essentially building a home, subcategory of building a home. Framing isn't the hardest part. It's about 10% of the home building process. So in theory, let's assume someone figures out how to do 3D printing perfectly. You're just automating 10% of the process, which means 90% of the process is still that missing 42-year-old that has to show up, super expensive, hard to find, to do the rest of the house, from framing to the finishes, etc. sorry, not the framing. The framing is what they solve. 90% of it being MEP, finishes, et cetera, just the roof, like literally finishing the rest of the home. So it doesn't solve the cost side. It doesn't solve the de-skilling side. So I don't think that's the way to go. And 3D printing isn't the full stack solution. It's just a piece of it. So we believe that the solution should be full stack. And then there's a more practical argument. 3D printing today is not cheaper than existing construction. So
Do you know why that is?
yeah, it's, first of all, you're using concrete. Concrete is expensive. Two, because you're just 10% of this process, and because the setup cost to a 3D printer, right, even if it's fully automated, is still 4 or 5 people, 6 people sometimes actually monitoring it. So like the economics don't make sense today. There's a company we know, their setup costs like $1.5 million for several printers on site. Those economics will never work when you're building a $300,000 home. And because it's 10% of the process, like, here, let's take a step back. To build a home, that dollar that it costs to build a home is like 60 to 70% labor related. And you're only solving 10% of that 60 to 70%. That's not enough cost driving down to actually incentivize someone to use 3D printing. I think there are settings where 3D printing will make sense. Like, I don't know, really affordable homes kind of need to make like the structure somewhere in Guatemala. Awesome. Military barracks, maybe in some interesting arenas where high conflict zones, super interesting.
It's like a one-off thing where you don't want a bunch of humans and stuff.
If someone can make, and we know one company, they're actually, we share an investor, I think they're interesting, but they figured out a way to make the most cost-effective 3D printer. That's interesting. They almost like lend it to a developer to frame a house in a specific market like Florida, where concrete is very acceptable because of hurricanes, so wind load, et cetera. That could be an interesting application. But again, we're here to literally produce millions of homes with very little skilled labor, and incentivize developers enough through a cost system where they will use what we're building, or the system we've built, and we don't think 3D printing is it.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about is like, do you guys just inherently have almost like a massive competitive advantage or monopoly once you scale out, you build those relationships with all those different developers? I imagine that they don't work with a whole bunch of other companies when they just work with you.
I think this is one of the rare, and we'll get into the other two solutions too, because I think the context is important before we talk about Cuby. I think this is one of those industries where like it is so big. Yeah, it is so big.
Like $2 trillion of unmet demand.
Housing demand, yeah, that could be absorbed just in the US. They're big dollars. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry just if you look at like construction, and like if you just focus on single family and multifamily alone, not other asset classes, like it is just so big. You can have so many players winning in this space, and I hope that's the case. The way we think about it, and again, remember our model is to launch factories. That's our product. We really believe that it's not the houses, it's this.
Do you want to explain that, like why that's important?
Yeah, so I think we didn't cover what Cuby is, but maybe we'll give some context. But like our business is to design, develop, deploy mobile microfactories that then mass manufacture and assemble single family homes. And key part is we're just starting with single family homes. So we figured out a way how to have this system that builds homes, not necessarily the home. That's not our product. We don't want to change the product. We believe the home is fine. Like what people live in is inherently fine. We think the quality can be better, but inherently it's fine. Like people know what a home is, regulators know what a home is, you know what a home is, incumbents know what a home is that are building the home. Like a home should stay the same. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. But we figured out a way, what we believe is the system to make homes. So it's a better process delivery mechanism. And we package that in what our product is, which is a mobile micro factory. That thesis is important for several reasons, but for me to cover that, we have to cover the other two reasons and why they don't work.
Yeah.
But inherently, a mobile microfactory for us solves things around kind of, we have like a 3-pronged thesis. One is centralized gigafactories don't work. Like what Tesla does, or what, I don't know, Ford and the car manufacturers do, or like even semiconductors. They have these massive, $100 million factories sitting somewhere where then the product gets shipped. We don't believe in that in this space, and it hasn't worked historically well.
Do you want to explain why?
Yeah, so when you have a gigafactory, it's generally centralized, and you're shipping a product that inherently will be millions of tons, millions of square feet over the course of a year. You're shipping it thousands of miles. The feedback loop on 1,000 miles it's a lot of time and distance. Plus, it's just kind of impractical.
It's like an awkward thing to ship.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we get into kind of the second solution. That's volumetric modular. Volumetric modular is, for your audience, if anyone's ever stayed at a Citizen M hotel, they've seen like an entire room be shipped. A lot of ADUs are, in California, for your audience, those are volumetric modular. What I mean by volumetric modular, imagine this room was built in a factory setting, all of it entirely to the finish. And you take this room, you put it in an oversized truck, and this truck is then chugging its way 500 miles to the construction site. You could have just that one room, or you could have hundreds of these rooms stacked on top of each other. One, not cost effective today. So if you compare hard cost day one, it's not cost effective. Unfortunately, it's not cheaper than existing ways that a home builder could build today. Two, that feedback loop, we talked about it. Because you're then just a solution to a piece of the value chain in that construction process, meaning you've now sold a product to someone else that has to go assemble it, to someone that has to lend on it, to then someone has to like put it together. You're just this product that got sold. You're not controlling that process. You mess up on site, you have these thousands of miles in between. So you don't control that process. Also, volumetric modular is interesting because you have the same repeated product. There's no deviation really. This is what you get to choose. It's that whole thing of like, you know, when Ford figured out how to create an interesting production line, right? The assembly line, there was one car and it was black. That's it. That's what kind of volumetric modular is. There's some, you know, deviation from that. That's what it is. But unfortunately, that's not how developers operate. I was a developer, very unique creatures. They want things to their spec. They want things that are localized to the market. They want high customization, you know, and that's what construction is today. It's a one-off project. Like you and I could build the same house next door. They'll be completely different, which is crazy. Imagine you bought a Camry and there's a guy that bought one right after you, and like, you guys had slightly different products. You know, you paid different prices, like kind of odd, right? For a product. That's what construction is today. So when you take volumetric modular, it's going in the complete like opposite direction of like, hey, if one product, this is what it is, it's assembled on site. Volumetric modular works well, and it's been around for several decades. It works well for student housing, for hotels where you have the same repeatable product every time of no deviation. That's fine. It can stay there. The other issue of gigafactories is because of the capex required day one, meaning it's so expensive to launch, it's such an investment. It takes many years to put up that factory, to physically build it. Sure, maybe 25, maybe 200 million, like, you know, it depends. Because there's such a high capex associated with launching a gigafactory or just a factory that's centralized, your economics have to be really robust to make that payback work, to make that P&L work. Unfortunately, real estate works in ebbs and flows when it comes to demand. So the issue is no one has enough demand at any given time to actually make those economics work. And you have all these factories going bankrupt, etc. So hard thing to make work. We don't believe in centralized gigafactories. So that's one of our key pillars is, hey, we believe that lean manufacturing, Toyota's production system, has worked for every other industry. Why not construction? How do we make it work for construction? Oh, we have to bring the factory closer to site. And to do that many times over, the factory has to be a product that's repeatable every time. Why does McDonald's have, 49,000 locations? The SOPs, the product is the same product, meaning the box, the way they hire employees, the hardware, the software. That's all a repeatable process. That's what we're trying to do. That's why when we containerize a factory, that's why when it launches, it is the same thing every time. And that's why it can be standardized. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two for us is, like I said, end product does not need to change. Why change what a home is? There's regulation tied to how to build a home, and it's very custom to the specific locale, although there is overlap between regulation called International Building Code. It's like, imagine you took all the code from around the world, stacked it on top and see where it overlapped. That's like what that is, and that's what we're trying to build within the constraints of. And because our system is somewhat dynamic, we get to fine tune it for every market. But changing the house, we don't believe in, because A, regulation, B, incumbents, they're very conservative creatures.
Does it also just make it way more scalable, because then you can go to most countries and just start throwing microfactories
It's
down? It's
important to be able to go anywhere and submit plans to build a home and no one to question, this is Cuby, the deep tech business. We almost want people to say, oh, some random builder's building a home. Great, that's a plus for us. And there's just end of the day incumbent risk, adoption. So pillar number two is don't change the end product. That's why when we create, like, what do our factories do? Let's take a step back. One, we're taking raw inputs and producing things from scratch that go into a home. Windows, helical piers, foundation, for the foundation, certain wall elements. But wall elements are interesting because a lot of folks have tried to panelize what a wall is. Like, this wall behind has things behind it, everything from wires to potentially plumbing, MEP, etc. We don't believe in taking kind of like a finished modular approach, because once it's on site, a lot of regulation says, look, we can't inspect this. We can't see behind the wall, and that's a big red flag. So what's interesting about our solution is it's technically not modular and prefab, because It's just taking what we produce or prep in the factory, bringing it to site and assembling it, but assembling it with unskilled labor using our software and certain processes we've laid out. That's where we're interesting. So pillar number 2, don't change the end product. Part of that is assembling on site, be it traditional, like this looks the same, staged in the same inspection kind of processes that happen, 5 different inspectors that show up, etc. So that's pillar number 2. It's very important. The third one, I think everyone's missed and hoped that, I guess I'll give an analogy. Like everyone loves to say in a lot of industries that need to scale up that first they're the Roadster, then they'll become the Model 3 in terms of affordability, right?
Yeah.
Because of unit economics eventually ramping up. This is the type of industry that if you're Roadster day one, you're going to die. No developer is going to make a decision unless it's directly affecting their cost in a positive way. Otherwise, they don't care. A lot of companies in our space have tried to say, we made a better product, use us, it's better. Like it's such a better thing than you build right now. Developers go, great, I don't care. Is it cheaper? If it is, I'll use it. If it's not, then bye, see ya. So that's what's happened in the space. Our third pillar is don't go to market unless you can be cheaper than, whatever the average cost to build is today in the US or elsewhere. And
so that's your like single KPI and you're just like, we have to hit this.
Our single KPI is tied to that. We have one KPI in the business. It's on everyone's desktop computer. Like it's literally the wallpaper. It's an equation. It's the output per mobile microfactory in terms of square footage relative to the skilled labor hours required to build a home. That translates to cost.
Interesting. So you guys, you're both you and Oleg are from Eastern Europe. And my understanding is that your like R&D facility is in Eastern Europe. So, and you're like here in the US and he runs that.
He splits his time between there and here. And we're going to shift that a bit right now.
How did you guys like decide that?
All right. So you interview a lot of folks that have raised a lot of money. Yeah. So this is the type of category where it seems like dollars have not solved getting to commercial market or commercializing. And it's a very expensive category to get through R&D and just from, initial concept to commercialization, or it's like Dan Golden from NASA would say TRL, technology readiness level. You go from like 0 to 9, commercially viable, et cetera. To do this category right, I don't think Oleg and I are the type of people that from pitch deck could have went to a venture investor and said, look, we need 50 to 70 million bucks to go try this thing and like test it, et cetera. Because that's what you would have needed. And that's what a lot of groups have done. And those groups are now incredibly undercapitalized and having issues raising more dollars to sustain kind of those costs. And I mean by costs, what's the biggest expense they want? It's human capital. Because of Oleg's previous business, he had a lot of infrastructure in Eastern Europe where engineers are 7 to 10x less in terms of cost, but just as high quality. Where we happen to be in Eastern Europe, it's one of the highest STEM education bases per capita. So lots of STEM background, really good engineers.
There's a lot of talent there.
A lot, especially on the hardware side. If you pick places, I guess like the US and El Segundo or wherever else folks are building, it's great when you're a seed stage company and all you need is 10 engineers. Try scaling up to 50 engineers while you're all in the same place competing for the same talent. It's expensive, it's incredibly hard. So we made the decision that basically in short, we'll get through to like TRL of 7 or 8. Now it took 350,000 engineering hours. For context, it takes 700,000 engineering hours to build something like a fighter jet. So we did all of that in Eastern Europe, and we did it with less capital raised than I think any group in our space with the same amount of progress.
Yeah, I saw your like burn and I was like, that gotta be, it almost looks like an error.
Yeah, it's important. And we want to be the group, like you want to talk about a vanity KPI? Huh. Oleg and I want to be the group that gets to billions of dollars in revenue with the least amount of dollars raised.
Huh.
Something like Roblox. And
do you have some like number that you have in your mind? It's like, we're going to raise less than this and achieve that milestone?
I think this round that we're in the middle of finishing now, I think that will, if all goes well, will be the last bit of equity we'll need. Because remember we talked about cost of capital a lot?
Yeah.
There's other cost of capital that will be better suited for growing our business than venture dollars at some point. And we're already probably more undercapitalized than groups at earlier inflection points than us. And we're at this point where like we kind of see the top of the mountain. And once we cross the top of the mountain, everything just gets kind of easier.
Yeah, it's kind of like rolling the boulders at the top and it's kind of rolling downhill.
We're still rolling it to the top, but we're close to kind of tipping it.
Yeah. Has there been any interesting differences because you're working with people in Eastern Europe, is there any like philosophical differences
for sure.
mentality of the people?
So I think when we initially started the business, folks were very skeptical about us building the business this way, like building machines in Eastern Europe, like Eastern European talent.
What were the biggest like red flags or things that they were worried about?
It's hard to go see. It's hard to like monitor progress. Like,
is it the same situation with the, like trading stocks? You're like, I don't know what I own. It's like, it's all,
Well, no, this is different because like we interact every day. Oleg is there. Like he's, like I showed you, like the update I got today is in the factory, right? Like, I will say though, like in quotes, doing really complicated IP elsewhere only works, I guess. It only works if you have these two things. I'd say two and a half things. Let's say that. One, you have to be culturally from the place. If you're not, it's a very different leadership style, very different. I don't think someone who grew up here would be able to manage 150 people there. Very different management philosophy, very different outlooks on life, etc.
What are the key differences that you would say are, strange or would be unusual?
People like to work and just be in a challenging environment. They don't need, like massages and like, coffee on tap type of thing. That's not the culture. People treat work as work. They want to be working on hard things that potentially can have impact, but they want to work for the sake of working under good leadership. I think leadership also has to be a bit more stern. It's more of like, there's definitely hierarchy in terms of kind of organizations and leadership. So culturally, I think you have to be from there because like you have to understand people. You have to understand their, motivates and their philosophies, etc. You have to speak the language. That's part of culture, right? Not everyone in our team speaks English, which is fine, because we can communicate both ways, but those aren't the people that are like front facing to customers, et cetera, which is also okay. There's a lot of companies that have software engineers in, South America or Eastern Europe, right? This just happens to be hardware. The second thing I think is you have to have some sort of infrastructure there. If you don't, it's hard to scale up that infrastructure, and you can't outsource IP. So all of our technical comes from Oleg. There's no like Oleg is the brainchild of everything technical that comes from our business. He is driving the top-down execution of all the hardware, software, etc. So it's still coming from him. You can't just pay someone and say, go invent this thing. Like imagine you were building, I don't know, a nuclear company, like a microreactor, and like you, Ty, decided tomorrow without technical skill set, you want to build the best nuclear, like how are you going to do that? You're going to hire engineers, be like, go figure it out, right? Like that's not how that works. So those two things are very important. But it's helped us significantly because we've gotten to a place where we've done 350,000 engineering hours, raising, I think, a relative, and the number, a very small amount of dollars.
I'd be curious to know if you had any like specific people or role models that you look up to or looked up to over the past few years.
I'll start with Oleg. He's interesting. He has like random ones that like you wouldn't think would be role models, but Oleg's whole thing is he's a big student of Toyota's production system. So lean manufacturing, he's every book he makes our team read is all tied to basically Toyota's production system. I don't know if I have per se role models. I think I'm a big fan of people that build real businesses with very little dollars and become profitable and self-sustaining. I'm a big fan of those types of people, and those type of people happen to come from really boring industries that aren't per se sexy.
Do you have any examples of like particular people that you studied?
I haven't studied people per se. I like reading biographies a lot, but like, it's corny, but I think Elon is a very interesting human being. And there's people that debate Elon all the time where they're like, it's funny when people debate him because it's like, right, what have you done, right? Building one business is really hard. Building multiple businesses is a lot harder. What else? I think, you talked about Mr. Beast. Like that's a good, random, interesting one to study. I think the Roblox founders are interesting, even though it's software. Like the way they've built that business, the way they've pivoted that business, the way they've monetized that business, I think is incredibly interesting.
What specific things about them?
They've raised very little dollars to get to where they've gotten.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just generally admire anyone building really hard things. And for me, sectors that are like, my role models sometimes are not even like people that have built businesses, but like are capital movers. Like I like certain founders in private equity that have done interesting things and backed interesting things. Like those people deserve credit too.
I'd be curious to know why you wouldn't if your R&D facility is in Europe, why wouldn't you make your first market Europe? like right next to the R&D facility?
Yeah, so like I said, our biggest value add and our biggest value driver is reducing the skilled labor hours required to build homes. Europe is a big market for us. So really it's anywhere first world. So I'll give an example. Like India doesn't need our help. They have a lot of labor. The question is like, how skilled is their labor? Can they execute relative to like what these massive now developers in India want to build, or even like, Middle East? They have these ambitious architects that are doing these crazy things, but that labor is, for example, the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, is being imported from India and Pakistan. Are they skilled enough to actually execute? So there's not a problem around the supply and really lack of labor. Therefore, it makes it cheap. Our value add is in first world countries where young people don't want to be construction workers and they tend to go into white collar jobs versus blue collar jobs. So Europe is a massive market for us. We're looking at it, but we really want to be in the US. We think that's the biggest, most incremental driver and proof point. We are looking at one market in Europe right now, Cyprus, where we think that will be our
Why does that even, why is that a possibility?
Why Cyprus?
Yeah.
Because our product is a factory and because we're trying to grow these factories almost in a white label capacity, we're at the whim of the best possible we can find for whatever market they're in. So like we're at the whim of just lining ourselves with good partners that they happen to be in a certain market. That's where we're going. Cyprus is an interesting place, actually. They had an insane net migration because of Russia, Ukraine, and all the countries that were doing tech all around. They've all migrated their engineers to Cyprus. I think Cyprus had like 20,000 new engineers moved to Cyprus full time. A lot of HQs have been moved, et cetera. So there's an insane amount of demand for housing. We happen to know some people that have moved companies there. They're excited about backing factories, being off takers for the housing. We're just being opportunistic. But our market is the US. We're very excited about the US. Our first factory outside of the one that we've now launched ourselves and are testing on is going to Las Vegas, which incredible market. I mean, the amount of migration happening to Las Vegas, the lack of housing, I think there's like 86,000 housing units that are missing from Las Vegas. It includes multifamily, but also single family. And the partner we're aligning ourselves with, I mean, they're incredible developer. They're going to unlock 6,000 acres of land using our factory. They're both the off-taker and the backer of the factory. And, they have a lot of, call it political net worth and a lot of interesting public sector relationships that are going to help potentially fund the factory and incentivize the factory to go there. But we want to repeat this hundreds of times. You saw our financial model. The whole point of the factory is to happen 200 plus times over and over again.
Yeah. How many iterations have you gone through to date to get to the model and like the building that you have right now and the factory that you are building?
It's a good question because our IP is anchored in like, I'd say 3.5 things. I like halves because sometimes it's not the most important thing. First, you have to design the kit of parts, meaning like what is a home? And the hard part around what we've designed is within the parameters of what is allowable of a home. We talked about this. So like designing the same home, but slightly different. The same home, but like the end product is the same, but the way it comes together might be different. So the kit of parts, that matters. Then we had to design the machines that make the kit of parts. We could have bought machines, but those machines no longer fit into containers and they're not mobile and setting them up is hard. So about 50% of what consists of our factory is completely proprietary to us. 50% is off the shelf, but has our logo on it, tooled to us, made tailored to us, et cetera. And then there's the third piece of IP, which is the software that sits on top of everything. We have no outside software. Everything from managing like training of
all labor.
Yeah, we built all of it. There's still a lot left to build, but we've built all of it. Nothing is external. Everything from even like managing payroll is built internal. Everything from like dispatch software, like the way Uber decides who to pick up next. We have dispatch software that takes the kit of parts for any given stage and chooses which site to go to first to drop off and then pick up the trash, et cetera, like waste, even stuff like that, all the way through Unreal Engine subassembly instructions that are dynamic every time, right? What's cool about our system is because it's a kit of parts, our homes can be different every time. It's not that box that we talked about. What's hard about that is imagine you bought an IKEA table, right? Imagine it came with an instruction manual. But now imagine the IKEA table can change after you've made it, meaning color, size, different legs, like different assembly. The instructions need to constantly match that changing end product. So we've built something for that, just pretty incredible. So I mean, there's a lot that we've built in-house, and therefore, like when you ask about iterations, we're iterating all the time. That's where Oleg gets frustrated. But like there's there is a V1 of a factory that will be commercialized, and we're already like that's going to Las Vegas. That's going to go to other places, and I can't announce some of the other deals we're working on, but it's going to go there. But even when it's there, the beauty of a mobile microfactory is each station is a container. Once we have a better version, you can plug and play. The software will constantly improve the process through definition of Kaizen, right? Like manufacturing is always improved. If you look at like the Model 3 or even the Model S, remember the original Model S? If you were to get in that thing, and like I recently got picked up in like the first version of a Model S from Uber, it was so bad. Like it's such crap.
Relative to today.
Look at today's Model S. From quality to like noise, like that's the definition of lean manufacturing. You are constantly improving as you go the production. So even those iterations will change. Where I'll give you examples of like how we've changed on the fly. There will be machines and equipment that Oleg works on for, say, I don't know, 5,000 human hours, like labor hours. We build it. We then start testing it with unskilled labor. Something doesn't work. It's not working fast enough. We'll go trash that thing and start over. So we're constantly iterating. Actually, it's funny. The first version of the factory was just this inflatable pneumonic structure. If you saw what was on top, it was just that. There wasn't even containers. But then Oleg's like, shit, it's going to take me months to set up this factory like everyone else. That's where they struggle. So then he's like, I'm going to shove everything into a container. So then when I can just dispatch it, that will make the perimeter circumference of the factory, and I can just deploy them very quickly, set them up. Like it's that whole thing of like idiot index. Can you take away all the processes, all the parts, et cetera, and like constantly work backwards into that? So that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I actually had a question about the idiot. I don't know if I already asked this, but what is the idiot index for, single family homes? And then not only on cost, but also on time.
So this is funny.
Like maybe even labor. So
yeah. I'll actually give you a really good example of idiot index in our scenario. So we just finished a house, one of our first houses with no skilled labor. What I mean by that, it was we literally took our guys that are used to like welding machines. They've never built a house. And we took some of our software engineers, and here's the kit of parts, go follow the instructions, go build a home. It didn't take the 30 days we wanted it to take. We'll get there. It took like 90 days, which is still, I mean, comparison to a family home is 7 to 12 months. 90 days is not bad for a very good quality home. And I'll show it to you after the podcast. As you're building it, you're constantly, Oleg's whole thing is, he calls them quants. What can he measure? If something is not measurable, you can't improve it. A really good example of that are tasks that are subjective in terms of when they're done. This is sheetrock, okay? By the time you're done with what you have to do with sheetrock, sanding it, painting it, etc., it's a very subjective measure whether it was done good or not good. And we tend to have 4 people in a given shift on site assembling. They each have their own task, and one person after the other is checking each other's tasks. It's hard to check whether this, like, is this painted well? Like, how do you judge that? It's not like if you screw something and, like is the screw there or not? You like right now cannot judge this. You can only judge if there was like a scratch, okay, but like, is it assembled well? Like, is it crooked? Like, Oleg is trying to remove all tasks that are subjective in that sense. That's why we might stop using sheetrock altogether and instead put, like, we'll use sheetrock for noise isolation, but instead of painting it, we'll have this bamboo core that just goes on top. So you don't have to do anything to finish it off. That's a good example. In terms of like idiot index, I mean, we're measuring labor hours. How can you reduce labor hours?
How many labor hours is it are currently required to build a home versus what you expect to get it down to?
I think a home gets built in about 7,000 labor hours right now. There's like 12 people across the ecosystem of like who steps in at different points in time, because they're all different people for different stages, all different subcontractors. We're trying to build a home, this is like the goal, and our math seems to be, I think we'll be able to shake out there in Las Vegas, but to build a home of 4 unskilled people in 2 shifts for the next 30 days, from foundation to interior finish. Our biggest bottleneck are going to be inspectors showing up on time within the timeline we need them to. Even if we're wrong by 50%, it's pretty good. Even if we're wrong by 100%, it's still pretty good. So I think we'll be at like, the goal is to be within like 2,200 labor hours.
So like a 60% improvement, roughly?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Final question. What's the hardest thing you've overcome?
Oh man, it's
life or business.
I think everyone has a tough life. Living is hard these days, just generally. I don't want to get personal because people all have different opinions and thoughts, but work-wise, I think the hardest thing we overcome is every day just like making it happen. It's, I think the life of an entrepreneur, anyone building anything, and like sometimes like it really is hard to build a business. Like that is the hardest thing there is. And really the hardest part I think is mental, because whereas like in life, I think you have mood swings that are maybe monthly, weekly. As a founder, you are like, your day could be amazing in any given hour and just complete dog shit the next hour. And I think it's being able to manage those extreme ups and downs. I think that's the hardest part. And overcoming that and being really good at staying neutral in those moments is really, really important.
Just surviving them and keep on going.
That's hard. And I really reference, it's funny, you said, who do I look up to? Will Smith is like a weird example for a lot of people. I think he's very motivational though. Some of the things he said are really good. And my favorite thing, and I know he's a little controversial now, right? Like weird things going on, but whatever. There was one quote that has resonated, or not one quote, he did an interview that I randomly came across. Maybe you've seen it. Do you remember he talks about like, hey, I was never the most talented, like I wasn't the smartest, but if I'm on a fucking treadmill with someone else and
he's just persistent.
I will not get off that treadmill until I die. I've seen that play out in life many times, where just be that person that just keeps standing up. Like if you're standing up, someone will eventually get fatigued. You just have to be the person that's in that room longer than anyone else, and that's it. It's that simple. That's probably 10% of it. 90% of it is luck, right time, right room, right point in the market cycle, et cetera. So I think the hardest thing is just
staying in the game.
Yeah.
Okay. Aleksandr, thank you so much. It was awesome interviewing you.
Cool. All right.